You're listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Bulldog Hour. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Sitting next to me is my co-host, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast this season's going, and we talked about that last week, but it really hit me between the game Friday and today that we have 3 regular season games done with the scrimmage. We're climbing down that first column when you put the schedules up.
Yeah, we're jump to the schedule already. Take a look. Let's see, Heat Week gone, Camp Opens gone, Coatesville gone, Central Dauphin gone, Mifflin gone, Exeter gone, and we're ready for MLK. Yeah, so pretty far along into the schedule, which is crazy to think about.
Well,
just 3 contests in.
I know we're not quite there yet, but middle of this week, we'll be halfway through September.
Yeah.
That's wild. But.
So moving quickly as it does every year. But we're here to recap the game against Exeter and attempt to preview the game against Martin Luther King. We're finding it hard to find any information on the Cougars. They've only played 1 game so far, and I've already told you everything I know about MLK. So we'll see how the rest of the show goes. But we'll probably spend the most time talking about the game against Exeter.
There was a point there where you were just talking about that, and I'm like, wait, you already told me everything you know?
Right.
Because I'm like, you didn't really tell me a whole lot. And then I realized you were talking for the show.
Yeah.
And it's still the same point. Yeah, we don't know a whole lot. We don't have a lot of information.
We don't. But that's why it's good to have someone else here that can add to the chatter. And welcome back Paul Roberts here for, what seems like the 25th time in the last few weeks. Paul, but thanks for joining us again.
Sure. It's always fun to be on. This should be an interesting show, to say the least, considering some of the recent results.
To be fair, all of our shows are incredibly interesting. So, I mean, you know that. You know that. Come on. So, yes, we're going to talk about the loss at Exeter, and, I'm sure that'll spiral into all kinds of places with stats and research and incredible internet discourse over the last few days. It's just it's a fun time, a really fun time. So up first, I just want to just quick touch on the events of yesterday, marking the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and you probably saw the graphic I put up, and the school district shared as well. So we just want to take time to introspective, retrospective, and remember everything that happened in New York, Pennsylvania, and outside of D.C. 20 years ago. A lot of people were bringing up, where they were, what they were doing, and the way the sports world reacted after the events. Wilson got to play that Friday night, a few days after it, even though professional leagues weren't playing. It was a pretty big deal, obviously, and like for many of the seasons I have on BulldogHour.com, the write-up from the local newspaper about everything, including an article about the games going on for high school football, at least across the state of Pennsylvania, and reasons why it should have continued. I have all those articles grabbed, so just go to BulldogHour.com /2001, and that should take you to the season page. And unfortunately, Wilson ended up losing that week up at Whitehall, but I remember it being a surreal experience standing on the sidelines. Everyone was given earlier in the week an American flag for the back of their helmets, which wasn't a normal thing at the time. Pre-game events, it was very somber, but it was certainly an interesting time period. And you can go and check that out on BulldogHour.com if that's something you are interested in pursuing. All right, so before we dive into talking about the game at Exeter, Justin and I just want to take some time to thank our sponsors here at the Bulldog Hour. Again, as usual, presented by my dad, Bill Mays and Mays Sandwich Shop. But they're not the only ones that have helped us out around here. We're also thankful for the support from CNS Supply Company, Andy Herr, Marty Palm, and our 3 anonymous donors. And besides sponsorships, advertising, and in-kind donations, and visiting the website, the other way that you can help us best, as I know Paul was already doing when we went live, and that's to do Justin's favorite phrase.
Yeah, like and share when you see something you like, or if you want people to see it, share it out to let them know.
Our next show will be in 1 week's time on the September 19th. Same time, same place, and we'll recap the game against Martin Luther King, and then preview the final non-conference game against Mannheim Central, and the Barons look like they're back this year after a down season in 2020. So we'll be talking about them on next week's show. Justin, as he usually does, jumped ahead and can't keep to a schedule, so he already talked about the 2021 schedule, where we're at. So
I just like to make things difficult for Joe,
of course,
and I think you would agree to that in many aspects of our friendship beyond the show. I like to be difficult. It's what I do.
Right. Well, everyone knows that, so we're all used to it by now. So appreciate you staying consistent in that matter.
Exactly.
All right, so let's have at it. Let's talk about the game from September 10th in Exeter. Wilson traveled to Rifton to take on the Eagles. First time since 2007 that Wilson and Exeter met. 7th time overall. And if anyone was paying attention last week, we know Wilson was victorious in the first 6 meetings, dating back to the late 50s, the early 80s, and then the mid 2000s. They were all back-to-back years where they played a set of 2. Wilson really dominated those first 6 games, obviously not losing, but 3 of the 6 were Bulldog shutouts. But a lot can change in 14 years' time, and we knew, as the 3 of us have collectively been saying all summer long, including through the month of August, of how good this Exeter team was, and we got to see that firsthand on Friday evening. Though things were certainly coming up Wilson in the early going. The Bulldogs jumping out to a 14-0 lead, courtesy of, I believe, an Exeter 3 and out, and then was a 3 out, or it was a short possession on their first possession, and then they punted, which almost ended in disaster for them. They got it away. Wilson drove down the field, though, and scored on a Brubaker to McMillan pass on, I think that was on 4th down.
It was, yeah, it was 4th down.
It was a big play, well-executed play, a great start for the Bulldogs, and then the next series, McMillan picks up a loose ball and takes into the end zone. All of a sudden, Wilson's up 14-0. But that's about where the good news stopped for Wilson. And Exeter ended up scoring 42 unanswered, which is, I just feel like, another thing that I need to do research on, because I'm not sure the last time you could say a team scored that many points on Wilson without there being any kind of offensive answer from the Bulldogs. But many people have had me digging into history books over the last couple of days, and we'll get to some of that. But Paul, why don't you take us through your initial thoughts as you were thinking them, or you want to tackle the Wilson lead and the disappearance of it thereafter? You take it where you want to go.
Well, it was the Ryan McMillan show to start, that's for sure. And he's only a sophomore, 205 pounds, so definitely a player to watch. Unfortunately, on that first drive, Gavin Leonard got hurt and missed the rest of the game. And that's a key player. You're talking about, a running back and a linebacker. He's been, getting more carries this year, along with Jaden Jones, of course, and he's a really good linebacker. So the injuries, it was kind of like an episode of MASH at one point there. Just one after another, getting down to your 4th and 5th wide receivers. We had talked previously about the offensive line injuries. Brad Hoffman, as I reported last week, was not the starting quarterback. But I don't want to take anything away from Exeter. And I know when I was on your show before, going back to the preseason, and then also after week 1, because I covered the Central York at Exeter game, and Central York was a state runner-up last year, has a quarterback committed to Penn State, and Exeter had a great shot to win that game. I mean, they were right there with Central York. I would say Exeter was the more physical team in that game, but they struggled in the red zone, and Central York ended up getting out of Don Thomas Stadium with a win. But I think that showed people, hey, Exeter's no joke. And when we went over the schedule before the season, I tried to point this out repeatedly, that if you think this is your dad or grandfather's Exeter, you're mistaken. They have Saturday players. And what I mean by that is these kids are going to be playing in college. When you talk about J.R. Strauss, who's already committed to Villanova, Joey Schlaffer will be a major conference, a power conference tight end. Penn State's tight ends coach was there. Maryland's tight ends coach was there. He's a 6'6" junior. He's a half-brother of Michael Mennett, so obviously he has good genes. He's not going to get any smaller. He had 2 touchdown catches in this game. You have Ty Yoakum, who will be a low-level Division I or a Division II type of player. I don't think there's an ounce of fat on that kid. He reminds me of kind of the old-school Wilson fullbacks, where I think he would much rather run over you than around you. Very physical player. Some tremendous collisions with Jaden Jones and some of the other Wilson players in that game. Anthony Kachese, who's only a junior, who's 6'6", plays right tackle for Exeter. He's going to be a college player if he puts on some more weight. Their quarterback, Colin Payne, is one of the better all-around athletes in the county. He was their leading scorer in basketball. So I think, people are getting the point here. I mean, they have players. And we've all heard the saying about the Jimmies and Joes versus the X's and O's. I thought the Jimmies and Joes for Exeter were better. Now, people in West Lawn and Spring Township, Whitfield and Drexelwood may not want to hear that. But that was my perspective. And if you look at the numbers, sometimes people say stats lie. I don't think you can make that case in this game. I mean, you look at the total yards, you look at the rushing yards. It was glaring how much that Exeter dominated in this game. Eric Nangle ran for over 200 yards in the game. And if people go to my website, BurkeSportsReport.com, I did an interview with Colin Payne and several of the Exeter players, and Colin talked about Nangle all week at practice. He said, "This is my Super Bowl." And I think this game was kind of a perfect storm in that for Exeter, it was their Super Bowl. I mean, this is one of the biggest games in the history of that program. And then you throw in the fact that they have one of the best teams they've ever had. Michael Mennett's senior year team was also very good. They're at home with a blackout. Their students, their crowd, certainly the PA announcer was very much into the game.
Let's not go there.
And Wilson was really banged up. Now, I'm the chief of the excuse police, so I don't want to take anything away from Exeter, because I don't know even if Wilson was at full strength if they win the game. But there are definitely numerous key injuries for Wilson. So you add all these things up, and it turned into 42 to 14. But I was shocked it wasn't a closer game. Was I shocked that Exeter won? No. And I've tried to tell people since the preseason. I know, Joe, you said the same thing, that if people are thinking this is going to be 38-0 again, you're just not paying attention to what Exeter had. And I was over there in the preseason. I saw them against Central York. It's a very good football team. Just like last year when you looked at Governor Mifflin as one of the best teams they've ever had, and they're back again this year. So I thought Exeter deserved to win, but I was a little surprised it wasn't more competitive, and I was surprised at the lack of execution. Now, maybe that's because you knew quarterback in there, but issues with snaps, issues with the mesh point on those read option type of plays. Just wasn't a crisp football game for Wilson.
That's the word that I was just going to use. It wasn't very crisp after Honestly, I feel like the turning point, and it was early, was when after the fumble return touchdown, that kickoff return shifted momentum to Exeter, and they executed to near perfection the rest of the way. I just after that point, Wilson just, like you said, wasn't crisp. It wasn't good on either side of the ball, and we could see the war of attrition taking its toll as the game wore on. And then then you get into the mental aspect of it, and no one likes to get punched in the face and punched in the mouth, and there was no answer at any point from even when an offensive drive would get going, it always ended with a turnover in some form, whether it was on downs or via a turnover. So they were able to move at times, and maybe you thought, it was 21-14, they're driving, and that one gets cut short. Then it's 28-14, you're driving, maybe make it a one-score game in early in the fourth quarter, and that drive ends without points.
Was it 21-14 when Brady Klein had the pass down the sideline, down the Wilson sideline?
It was 21 or 28.
Right, I wasn't sure, but that was one of those points where I'm like, okay, because even though he stepped out,
he didn't though.
Okay,
that's fine.
Okay,
his cleats are white, and the guy who stepped out was wearing black cleats.
I really couldn't see from where that was all the way across the field for me. But okay, so he's down there, but it was still a big gain, and they've got momentum. If they go in and score, they're either have a chance to tie it up or be down one and maybe reclaim some of the momentum. But I felt the same thing. It felt like things shifted right on the kickoff from on that kick return.
Well, during that kick return, Josh Drake got injured.
Yeah,
starting safety wide receiver out for the rest of the game. And like you had mentioned, or just before that, Gavin Leonard had gone out injured. So immediately you're down. You're already down multiple starters. Now you lose two more, and it just seems like that kickoff return was just a sign of things to come. That everything was an uphill battle the rest of the way for Wilson. They just couldn't dig themselves out of the holes that they were put in there for a variety of reasons. And it was tough to watch. It was rough. But everything you mentioned about, and you said they literally used the words that this was their Super Bowl. I mean, you could tell. I mean, there was all that energy and emotion, and kudos to them for digging out of. They could have easily crumbled when Wilson went up two scores. When you have this thought in your mind that we've never been able to beat Wilson. Wilson's always seen as the best team in the county. Now we're down two scores. They could have just folded right there, but they didn't. And obviously, it helps when you have players of the caliber that they're trotting out right there. And I didn't get to see Mennett's senior season in person at all, so. But I know they were very good. They won the Berks Section 1 that year.
Beat Governor Mifflin.
The thing I think, and Justin and I talked about this a lot. It was a long wait after the game and car ride home. There was a lot of talk happening. Justin and I talked. We still, and I think now that these games are over, it doesn't matter to us because we're not going to see either of them again this season. I still think Governor Mifflin's much better than them. I do. I think Exeter is a very good team. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I don't think that they'll be able to hang with Mifflin. I just don't see it. The way that Mifflin operates, I believe they definitely have the talent to match up with the strength of the Exeter offense. And I don't know if Exeter will be able to withstand the Mifflin attack. Since we're Wilson and the outsiders, I have no problem saying I think Mifflin wins that game. And I think they win it handily. Justin and I talked that if Wilson Mifflin lines up this year, I don't know if Wilson can steal victory in a 10-game series. I don't. Mifflin was that controlling and dominating. I don't think that game was close. And sometimes that happens. I know, people were you can't be giving Mifflin praise like that, or you can't think that they're that much better. And it's sometimes it happens. They have a generational team last year and this year.
Right. Nick Singleton ain't walking through that door after this season.
I mean, they'll have a couple good players back next year, but you're losing a few. Eden and Nick are just huge components of that team.
Trey Rock.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think Mifflin is better than Exeter. I think Mifflin's going to breeze through the Berks League. But Justin and I said, as big of that as wide as the margin of victory was in the Exeter game, I think if Wilson and Exeter play 10 times, I think they're closer to even. I do. And I know Exeter will scoff at that. a 28-point victory will tend to do that. But if you watch the entire game, everything we talked about. Now, maybe Wilson would have to be absolutely perfect to win a couple of those games. I just think that there was too many points in that game that one thing changes, it's a different game. And I don't see that in the Mifflin game.
I see what you're saying.
Continually, Mifflin was better the entire time.
Right.
And in the Exeter game, I can't say that Exeter would beat Wilson 9 or 10 out of 10 times.
Right.
I cannot go there at all.
And I think some Exeter fans might say, well, we threw a pick six and we also lost a fumble. So Exeter did not play a completely clean game either.
No, right.
Right. But
fair points.
Right. But little nugget about the Exeter Mifflin series. Mifflin has won 14 of the last 15 against Exeter. So
obviously the Menet year, the only
that was that was and they had several really good players on that team, and it was a close game in Rifton that Exeter was able to win. So they're going to have to prove it against Governor Mifflin, just like they proved it against Wilson. Going back to the turning point, I'll give you guys another key sequence, in my opinion. Wilson was still up 14-7 when Jaden Jones makes the interception.
Mm-hmm.
They had first down at Exeter's 37. So you have a short field and a touchdown lead. You score there. It's now 21-7. And maybe, again, the Exeter players start thinking, what's going on? Now we've had another turnover here. We gave him a pick six. Now, we'll see what happens, with the fumble return, rather. But that was a golden opportunity, and Wilson didn't even get a first down on that series.
Right. Well, I felt like that was one of those times where it felt like there were stuff that would happen, whether it was a penalty or something with the snap, or just miscommunication, whatever. But we end up in these like 2nd and 20 something or 2nd and 30 something, and it's like, and if you missed it, the PA announcer would remind you that it's
3rd and Manayunk.
Yeah,
right.
And so it's one of those where, like, well, you're not giving yourself a shot at that point, that's not, and especially in high school football, where like even if you get a pass interference penalty, it's not the automatic first down,
right? Yeah.
So like if it's 2nd and 25, you get a 15-yard penalty, it's still 2nd and 10, so
yeah.
That's another chance where the first 5-10 minutes or so, everything kind of bounced Wilson's way, and then there were a couple where it was so close, but it didn't.
That interception, that drive after the interception, Wilson only had it, like you said, they went 3 and out. They had a 1-yard rush, a 5-yard rush, a 1-yard rush, and an incomplete pass, turnover and downs on 4th,
which was wide open. It was an out.
Oh yeah,
I remember it was that should be a first down. It was an out to the far side of the field. Is that the one that
slipped out of his hands? I think it was.
It was underthrown. So,
right,
but that was a play where Brubaker was not under pressure. I mean, there were.
I'm pretty sure that's the one.
There were plays where he certainly was. That was one I'm sure he would like to have back because
if I'm thinking
it was open.
It was one that as he's throwing, it's slipping out of his hand because I think immediately you could tell. I was like, that slipped right out of his hand, and Sean was open.
Right. Yeah. It's a first down.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and I know, like you said, Exeter could say, well, if this play doesn't happen, I'm not saying we're winning if that that's a completion or anything. I'm just saying there's so many things that went wrong. If a few of them go right, I think it's a different game.
Right. And I think your point is accurate that it was more competitive than the Mifflin game.
Oh,
there was really no point in the Mifflin game that you thought, Wilson's going to win this.
At halftime of the game, I said to Joey, I'm like, I'm encouraged because I'm like, I think we can win this game. It's 21-14.
Right,
but
yeah. And you're getting the ball.
Right, we're getting the ball. I think we can win this game.
Yeah. Well,
but I was like, I'm a little discouraged because I feel like we had an opportunity to really, take control early on, and we don't have that now. But I still... That was not my thoughts at halftime of the Mifflin game.
Agree.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that kickoff return that led to them cutting it to 14-7, and we just talked about after the interception, the ball slipping out of Gannon's hand on 4th down. that next drive, 7 plays, they drive down the field. Exeter ties the game 14-14. The next Wilson drive, you start to see the issues that are all self-inflicted. A either poorly timed snap or a poor snap. I think it was snap when they weren't ready. You lose like 16 yards or something like that.
That's the play I was thinking of. I was a series off.
Then you get sacked in the next play. You end up in, I think it was like 3rd and 35. You get a few yards back, but you got a punt. And sophomore punter Ben Rada had an amazing punt.
Yeah.
It was down to their 18. He's punting from the 20. I think Wilson's own, just outside the red zone, and he flips the field position, puts it inside. And what happens on the next play? 82-yard touchdown. Since every time you thought something went Wilson's way, there was a breakdown or an issue next. And when he ran, an 82-yard, I can't even remember a huge rushing touchdown against. I know it's happened in the 11 years that I've been watching all these games, but have a huge rushing touchdown like that, I was just in shock. I thought something was going right.
It wasn't one of those break through the line, everybody was up close, and no, they had multiple chances to knock him out after 30 yards and after 40 yards, and they just didn't. And then he just went the rest of the way.
Yeah, it was just a sweep that Exeter ran. And give credit to their offensive line. I mean, those guys, Lucas Palange has played very well. He's a junior, very smart player. They have a huge center in Kyle Helm, who's a 300-pounder. Anthony Kachese, I mentioned him. I think potentially he could be a Division I player. He's a 6'6" right tackle. And Kerry Seattle, who's been a long-time coach in this county, and is also the executive director of the BCIAA. He coaches their offensive line and does a really good job. In fact, I was at Wyomissing yesterday talking to Coach Wolfram, and he brought up Kerry Seattle's name about the job he's doing there at Exeter. And I'm trying to remember, Joe, if it was the season preview or after week 1, we talked about Wilson up front and that there were some questions there.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't like it. I will say I have not been added on Twitter over the past 2 weeks from those same people, but it wasn't meant to be disparaging. I thought it was bringing up a very fair point when you lose 4 starters on your offensive line and you also lose starters on the defensive line. I thought it was fair to say that is a question going into the season. Exeter averaged 7.7 yards per carry. Now, it's going to be inflated when you have an 82-yard run, but they still ran the ball. And we know what Governor Mifflin did on the ground. And coaches will tell you all the time, most games are won up front. The skill guys get a lot of publicity, and in fantasy football, that's all we pay attention to. But if you can't win at the line of scrimmage, usually you can't win the game. So I think that's one area that Wilson is going to have to improve on when you look at what Exeter and Governor Mifflin were able to do. Now, I try to be a big picture guy as opposed to the prisoner of the moment. And, sometimes with high school football, people just go Looney Tunes after a game or two. But I think we have to realize who Wilson just played. Governor Mifflin had a chance to win a state championship last year, and I would argue is better this year. Exeter has one of the best teams they've ever had and almost beat Central York, the 6A state runner-up, in the first week. So I know some fans don't like to give other teams credit and only look for blame. I don't work that way. I think, when you look at a Nick Singleton and you look at some of the players for Exeter that I mentioned, and another thing you'll hear in the interviews on my site, they all talked about, we want to prove this isn't the same old Exeter, because they've had a history of struggling in some really big games and have had a number of penalties in those games. And that was a real point. And you could see it when they got down 14-0, as you guys were mentioning. They didn't UPS it. I mean, they didn't mail this one in when they got down and Wilson had all the momentum. But, there's 3 games in. There's still 7 to play. And we're back this year to allowing 8 teams into the District 3 playoffs in 6A. If I'm on Wilson's team right now, that's how I'm looking at it. Like, we still have 7 games to go.
Right.
No.
And winnable games on the schedule. So now you have to make a decision. And this is why I think sports are great, because it mirrors life. You're going to have difficult times in life. Certainly I can talk about that from my profession not too long ago and what happens. So now what do you do? How do you handle that?
How do you respond?
Right. Do you say, well, hey, we just got blown out by Mifflin and Exeter. Our season's over. Forget about it. Or do you say, we have 7 games to play. We could win another section title. They've won a record 27. They can still do that. There's nothing to say they can't do that. And we could still qualify for districts. 8 teams are getting in. It's not like last year with the truncated situation because of COVID. So now the ball is in your court. How do you respond? There's certainly plenty of motivation there. Just pop in the film from the last 2 games. If that doesn't motivate you, then I don't have an answer.
Right. And that's exactly what Coach Dom said immediately after the game.
Yeah.
He's like, we took it on the chin the last 2 weeks, but we're only through 3 games. Yeah, you're 1-2, but guess what? There's 7 games on your schedule, 7 winnable games.
Mm-hmm.
And you could finish 8-2 with a section championship.
I know it, and I said this to Joe and to a couple others last week after the Mifflin game, and I said, like, look, it's not, no one wants to lose that game, obviously. But I'm like, in reality, it only was like when they list out their goals at the beginning of the season, I wasn't there for that, but I know that beating Mifflin's probably one of those goals. And I know that, winning the section is one of those goals, and making districts, winning districts, like all those things are goals. In reality, last week, and the same is true this week, only one of those goals is not there anymore, and that was the beat Mifflin one. Now, it could have been Exeter. I'm not privileged to what those goals, either written or actual, are, but like, there's
Wilson
only
Exeter
one of those.
Football isn't a rivalry.
Right.
I don't think that, and that's not I know.
Yeah, they've only played 7 times.
It's the 7th time we've ever played them. Right. It's not there. It's within 10 miles of the district, but it just hasn't happened that often.
So there's so much to play for yet, and we really harp on that, and that needs to be kind of the attitude moving forward. Just look, and we talk about this. Now, fortunately, it doesn't necessarily play out like this every year, but we talk about this every year when we look at the Wilson non-league schedule. We're always like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
Those
like
first 4 or 5 games,
and we always say, and Coach Dom's always talks about this in preseason, in the off season, or in the off season, or I guess really more preseason, when we interview him previewing the year, we almost always ask him a question about scheduling, and he's always like, yeah, it's tough, and you don't know how it's going to go, but it's all about getting better,
right?
And learning who you are and fixing those things for later in the year.
Yeah.
And guess what? Sometimes those lessons are hard lessons, but if you use them to get better, if you use them for motivation or whatever that is, or to figure out this is what we need to get better at, then it's not lost. And here's the other thing, neither of these 2 teams, this sounds ridiculous, but neither of these teams are 6A, so these teams are 5A. So we're not going to face these guys. And unlike Mifflin or Exeter in 6A, there are some really good teams, but there isn't anybody head and shoulders above like some of the teams in some of the other classifications.
Yeah, there's some years you can make a case that 5A is better. Not often, but it does. It does happen sometimes. But yeah, I mean, and there are 24 seniors on this roster, so you have potentially 7 games left. I mean, I would think you would value each opportunity, especially after what happened last year and wondering, are we even going to get to play? You still have 7 opportunities to go out there with your friends.
Have fun with your friends.
Right. And win another section title. And I'll also say, too, that stuff about coaching staffs. Well, quick question. Name me.
Well, we asked the questions here.
This is an easy. This is a layup for you. Name me the Berks County coach who has a higher career winning percentage than Doug Doms.
I don't think
I don't believe it
exists.
exists.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, no one would be he's won about 84% of his games. So have the last 2 weeks been really rough if you're a Wilson fan? Sure. But to, act like this is the apocalypse and not realize, what these guys do and the time that they put in and the time they spend breaking down film and, the X's and O's of the game, special teams, trying to block punts or return, like analyzing every little thing where you could get just one advantage. If you don't appreciate that, I can't really help you.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I think it's absurd that there's, and to be fair, an incredibly small minority of people that don't think Doug was the right choice for the job, or thinks he somehow has overstayed his welcome. And it's like, me saying it out loud is like the most absurd thing for everything you just mentioned. And that doesn't take into account that he had already been here on hugely successful teams for 30 years before he got the job. So it boggles my head. It makes me so angry when I see comments about the coaching staff, because you have no idea, you as a Wilson fan and community, how lucky we are to have the men that are coaching this team. If you have a problem with that, I think you should probably do some research about other schools across the state, but even just here in Berks County. They would kill to have a consistently dominant program like this, and that is by and large the product of the coaching staff.
They haven't had a losing season since 1963. Period. End of story. I rest my case, Judge Wapner. All right, bring in Rusty the bailiff and Doug Llewellyn, the court reporter for fans of the People's Court, which I liked when I was growing up. I mean, this, and again, we have to go back to who they're playing these past couple weeks. And also, one topic we haven't brought up, but I know I mentioned it after the Central Dauphin game. When I looked at CD's schedule, and after looking at that team, I said CD could go 6-4 this year. Now, beating Central Dauphin, it's a good win. Don't get me wrong. But is anyone going to argue that was a vintage Central Dauphin team?
No.
Right. So what happens is you're coming off that high of winning your opener at home against that opponent, and maybe that got overvalued. And now you're going up against two teams who are better, who have generational talent. I would say, and this is just hypothetical, outside of Cam and Jaden Jones, who would you say was a better player than the guys that Exeter had that I mentioned?
See, I don't know enough about the guys at Exeter to really comment about like.
But I mean, there wasn't anything in that game that I thought Wilson owned that they could say, hey, we can go back to this and we can do this over. I mean, the first drive looked like they were going to be able to run the ball. That ended. That went away after that opening drive. And Leonard getting hurt certainly did not help matters. But, I think you just say, listen, Governor Mifflin and Exeter, this particular year, were better teams. But the season isn't over.
No.
And people don't remember what you did in August and September.
Right.
And remember what you did in the playoffs.
There are plenty of examples of Wilson teams finishing 7-3 in the regular season and winning a playoff game or two. And, making noise. It doesn't matter how you start, it's how you finish. And there is so much still on the table. Like Justin said, only one of those preseason goals can't happen. And it's a game. Yeah, it's a rivalry game, but who cares? You move on. It's much more important to win the league.
If you get the others, it'll ease that. It'll always nag at you a little bit, but it'll ease that if you rebound and work towards and maybe even get close to some of these other goals.
I mean, it wasn't all that long ago that we were going through a very similar conversation on these shows, because back in 2017 and 2018, the seasons didn't even exactly start as many thought they would, especially in 2017. They were sitting at 1-2, just like they are now, losing to Mifflin in the opener. They got a win at Springford the next week, but they lost to Central Dauphin in week 3, so sitting at 1-2. And this is after a dominant run from basically 2008 through 2016, where very few teams were beating them, especially in Berks, Lancaster, Lebanon counties. So 2017 was a bit of an eye opener, but that team rebounded. The streak ended, and they lost to Township. They didn't win the section title, but they won a playoff game and had to go battle a Harrisburg team. They finished 8-4. Like, how many other Berks programs would kill for 8-4? And Wilson's just like, oh man, what a year, what a year! And then in 2018, it happened again, back-to-back 8-win season. Can you believe it? I mean, the audacity,
sky is falling.
The audacity of an 8-win
the
season.
program.
Well, like, and it's funny because I was thinking the similar thoughts yesterday. Yesterday morning when I'm hearing like people, and they heard it a lot of this week actually, people on the national scale talking about how Clemson's been exposed. They're not on the same level as the other elite teams now. And I'm like, because they lost to Georgia, who also didn't score an offensive touchdown.
Well, Ohio State's also done.
Right.
They're finished.
But like, people are prisoners of the moment sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
and it is tough, and it's not fun. Like, it's not fun to be on the other end of, what you've been on the winning side of these things so many times.
Well, I said it last week.
It just, it stinks. But you know what? The only thing you can do is work hard to get better
and I would pose this question: is it better to have played Exeter and Mifflin and lost, or play team X, Y, or Z and win 42-0, which is a game you get. Sure, the fans are going to be happy and all that. What do you get out of it? You get nothing out of it. I always respect the teams, the coaches in various sports that use the non-league and go out and play people, because that's how you get better.
Right.
You don't get better by beating people by the mercy rule every week. Now, sometimes that's going to happen. Most schedules, Wilson's doesn't really apply to this. Most schedules, every non-league opponent isn't really, really good. But what are you taking out of your non-league schedule? At least now, if you're one of the Wilson coaches, you can go back to the kids and say, look, you probably aren't going to go up against people better than what you just ran into. So now you got a taste of where you need to be. It's motivation, and it's the fact that the season is far from over.
So I'm a stats and history person. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been doing a lot of research for a variety of reasons after last week and this week. And, the first thing that comes up is Wilson lost back-to-back games. When's the last time that happened? Well, the last time that happened was 2003. Or excuse me. Yes, 2003. Yeah. I have the wrong one up. There we go. 2003.
This is amazing. It's been 18 years since they lost 2 games in a row. We're not talking about 3-4 games, 2 games in a row. It's been 18. That's incredible.
I think we know who the quarterback was.
I was going to say, check out team captains.
Yeah. So Chad Henne was the quarterback of that team that, can you believe it? Lost 2 games in a row. They lost to McCaskey in Lancaster, then they lost to Hempfield and Landisville.
Was that still Perry Patterson?
No. This was Perry Patterson. What was Justin's class of 2000, graduating class of 2002.
The year
Fall
before.
Of 2001.
Okay. Danny Melendez was on that team who went to Maryland. Mm-hmm. Nequan Lee went to Delaware. That was, in my opinion, that was the golden age of the LL.
Yeah,
the Bryant brothers were at Reading High. You had Cedar Crest.
Joey and I so many times were like, back in our day.
Because now it's approaching 20 years, since those teams happened.
When we talk about when we talk, and it's crazy because, if you tell somebody like, oh, Hempfield or Township or someone like that, but when you say like, no, Like Wilson was in battles with Cedar Crest and McCaskey and Reading, and people were like, "What?" Like the kids, but like they were.
Kids now, they weren't born.
Like they weren't even in school when Reading and Mifflin were in the LL League. So. Yeah,
it's hard to believe that's 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, so next year will be
Tell me about
20 years since my senior year.
You guys are getting old.
I know. Oh. Tell me about it. I'm understanding that. But so actually, we'll get to his year because that one will come up here.
Thanks.
But yeah, so McCaskey beats Wilson, Chad's senior year, 31-14, and then next week Hempfield beats Wilson, 27-24, and I know. There was a big stink about some call in that game. I'm off at college at this point, so I wasn't there for that. I don't know what happened. It was a fumble. Apparently, there was a fumble, but the officials said no, and I guess that had a huge impact on the game. So that was the last time that Wilson lost back-to-back game. As you said, nearly 18 years ago, like end of September, early October 2003. There's an entire generation of Wilson students that were born and graduated between the time that Wilson lost back-to-back games. So that one sticks out. Obviously, Wilson's sitting in a 2-game funk right now. When's the last time Wilson lost 3 games in a row? So it actually wasn't. It was actually during. Believe it or not, this is actually during the Chad Henne era again, because it was my junior year, Justin's senior year, in 2001. That we already mentioned during the 9/11 at the beginning, when Wilson lost to Whitehall, that kicked off a 3-game losing streak for the Bulldogs in 2001. Started off the season with 2 victories, lost at Whitehall. Then the next week was the big one, shut out by Cedar Crest at Gursky. It was the first loss at home at Gursky in 7 years.
So was that Brandon Kirsch and Jaron Hayes?
That was their senior season. And then the next week, we went to McCaskey and lost to Perry Patterson. Right. So that was a 3-game losing streak. So I was on a team that was sitting at 2-3 halfway through the season. Had to win 4 of your last 5 to guarantee that the streak would continue. The winning season streak. Obviously, we could go 3-2, and the non-losing streak would continue, which is the one that dates back to 1964. But we knew we had to go 4-1 in those last 5. The playoffs were already out because back then only 14.
Right. Oh yeah.
So we knew the playoffs were not happening.
Yeah, there were teams that would go 9-1 and not get in the playoffs.
So that was that was the fall of 2001. The last time Wilson lost 3 games in a row. And obviously, we hope that 2021 is joining them, and we'll preview this next opponent, Martin Luther King, briefly here at the end. As I said, there's not a lot to talk about the Cougars. There's very little information out there. Wilson's never played them. So there's that. But then the other thing that came up was, wow, Wilson just lost by 28 in back-to-back weeks. When's the last time Wilson lost that many games by that many points in a row? And we got to go back an additional decade to 1993. But this is a great, and this team came up 4 years ago when we talked about the team starting 1-2. This team came up then because I believe at the time it was the last time this early in the season Wilson had a losing record to this extent, 1-2 in first 3 games.
Were they still playing Pottsville back then?
So yeah, this was Shane Stafford's senior season at Wilson. The Bulldogs started with 2 consecutive losses. The first 2 games of the season were losses. Wilson got shut out by Pottsville at home and then got blown out by Owen J. Roberts at home. Both games were at Gursky, at the Wilson Stadium at the time. So, 27-0 and 32-6.
Wow.
They lost the first 2 games. Now, you think about the stuff online now. Imagine if social media existed back then. After opening the season being outscored, what is 59-6 at home?
I am sure everyone would have had a calm and reasonable response.
Absolutely certain. However, if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can see there's this banner on this season page, and that banner indicates a league championship because after the team started 0-2, they went 8-1 in their next 9 games, and they shared the league championship with Hempfield. Wilson did lose again, and it was to Hempfield, and it wasn't very competitive. Hempfield won 33-8, but Hempfield lost another league game, so Wilson and Hempfield shared the league championship in '93, and that team could have folded after the first 2 weeks after 2 dismantling losses, but they went 8-1 over their next 9 and shared a league championship.
One of the biggest hitters I've ever seen at Wilson was part of that group, Gooch Adams, who also played basketball with Shane Stafford. They won back-to-back county titles, but yeah, what's crazy is these streaks that we're bringing up where they've struggled had 2 of the Mount Rushmore quarterbacks.
Yeah.
When we discussed that, in Chad Henne and Shane Stafford.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy to think, but it also proves that it's a team sport. One incredibly talented person doesn't make up for everything that goes into the 11 on offense, defense, and special teams. It's an entire team effort, and they're going to need a full team effort if they want to get back in the win column and make this a successful season. That game was uncharacteristic of them athletically, emotionally. They can be better. They know they can be better. The coaching staff will make sure of it. So I expect to see a different Wilson team, even though I expect, and I know people are asking via text and in the comments, how many of these guys are coming back, the injured players? One, I don't know health information about the players. But honestly, I don't know that we'll see any of them back this week. Now, you had mentioned pregame, and we saw that 2 of the offensive linemen that were out for the first 2 games, were dressed. They did not play initially, but they both did see the field later.
Right. Worley and Dendle.
Worley and Dendle, yes. Sophomore Jack Dendle and senior Alex Worley both missed the first 2 weeks of the season with injuries. They made an appearance in the Exeter game, though they neither did start. We'll see what happens this week as the war of attrition took hold once again, with both guys, I think, getting through that game healthy. I would expect to see more of them this week as well. But, you're still missing a handful of other guys, some 2-way starters. And if I was someone, if you told me right now, are any of them coming back, I would say no. No,
I agree. And just during the show, I got a message from someone, so I would agree with that.
I don't think you're seeing any of them.
Yeah. And I thought, I'll give credit to Dendle for gutting it out, but we noticed even in pre-games, he was not moving.
Not 100%.
No. So, credit to him for giving it a go. I thought Worley was moving a little bit better in pre-game than Dendle was. So to have them back certainly helps, but at wide receiver, we saw a lot of Edison Case, who's a sophomore.
Yeah. And I believe the tallest kid on the team.
Or as the PA announcer kept referring to him, Chase Edison. Like,
okay,
over and over again. I'm like, that's not it.
Maybe less exuberance and more focus on the.
I was not going to be the guy who goes up and says, "No, it's this name," because I've been in boxes where that happens too, and I'm like, look, it.
Yeah.
But he and actually
he was playing on defense.
And he had
too.
a great breakup in the back of the end zone on that one play, maybe right before
halftime. Yeah, it was right before halftime.
He had a shot and he knocked it out. So even if the Exeter guy came down with it, he was going to be well out of bounds. So he that was one of the things that I noticed. And if we want to look at things to take away, you don't necessarily want a lot of the young guys thrown in there and in positions where they need to be thrown in there. You like that if you have one of those games where you're up and the clock's running late and all that stuff. But some of the young guys were stepping up, and look, there's a bit of an adjustment period, especially in a game like that. But when you know what? Get in there and get experience. And start learning.
Well, and he was someone that I think performed very well in the scrimmage against Parkland in the JV portion, and then he got
Coatesville.
You're right. Normally it's Parkland, Coatesville, Wilson scrimmage, Coatesville, and Eddie Case played really well in the JV portion, and then he got to play in the varsity portion as well, and we got to see him now with the injuries taking hold, and he got to play at safety, and with more than likely TJ Flight and Josh Drake out, maybe we'll see him more on offense too. When he presents a possible size mismatch, at least based on the Wilson roster, he's the size.
They also have to They have to figure out a way to get Cam Jones more touches. I don't really care how you do it. If it's jet sweeps, if it's screens, I mean, he is so talented, as you see in the kick return game. To me, on offense,
they wouldn't even kick to him on Friday.
Exactly.
Like,
they
were glad just kicking it out of bounds,
right,
or kicking the little push
exactly.
kicks,
Which is such a sign of respect. But to me, Cam Jones needs a minimum of 10 touches on the offensive side of the football. However you want to do that, if it's, using him, like I said, on those jet sweeps, or just targeting him more in the passing game, a minimum of 10 touches, because your best players need to have the football, especially now when we're moving forward and Leonard's hurt and Jaden Jones, we're still waiting to confirm how long he is going to be out after getting ejected in the last game.
Right. We should probably qualify that, because I don't know if everyone realized that, because at the time I didn't realize it, that when a player gets ejected, they're already subject to, at a minimum, a 1-game suspension. So as far as I know from the PIAA rulebook, Jaden Jones will be out for the Martin Luther King game. However, prior to last year, there was kind of an addendum added that there could be some altercations, ejections that could result in a 2-game ban. And I know football coaches were not happy about it, because the regular season is so short. When you're talking about 10 versus 22 for basketball, and some of the other sports, you're talking in the 20s for matches. It seems a little bit excessive for football, but they said no, all sports will be subject to the same. So, we're trying to get clarification on how many games. Unfortunately, Wilson's senior running back linebacker will be out after his ejection Friday evening. We have no inside information on that.
And I think that new rule was put into effect because PIAA was noticing an increase in the number of, and I don't think it was just basketball, but sports in general, where players or coaches were getting ejected, and said, look, we have to figure out a way to put an end to it. This is still high school basketball, high school football, whatever sport.
Right.
You need to conduct yourself in a professional and orderly manner. And so that's why they decided to increase penalties. And there is language in there about making contact with officials and other coaches. There's also verbiage in there about foul language and vulgarity, which can equate to a 2-game suspension. So we'll see what happens with that situation. It's unfortunate, but that was something that was put in 2020, and I think the PIAA really just had enough of, and I think it was more so for coaches, but certainly it happens with players too, had enough of like adults not acting like,
which we're very familiar with over the last few days.
Shocking.
So, shocking that the adults are the ones that aren't so grounded and level-headed. It's really, they're always making it out to be the kids. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else, Justin or Paul, to say as we wrap up the Exeter game and just look towards MLK?
Well, again, it's not ideal, and I don't mean to minimize the losses, but like they're over with. Like it's done. You have to learn from it. You have to get better. I know they had film today. Like get better and start prepping, and let's end this skid this week. Let's take care of business on Friday. Don't worry about all those other stuff. Don't. You know what? If there's anything, like we don't need to be worried about like, well, are we going to get the 1 seed in district? Let's worry about winning this week.
You
worry
win,
about
it takes
winning
care,
this week. Don't worry about what other teams are doing. Just worry about winning this week, and then next week you shift your focus to Manheim Central, and the week after that you shift to the league schedule. Like, just handle one thing at a time. Let's focus on getting better, cutting down on mistakes, and being ready for MLK so that you can go out and play better. Because I'm confident that if this team goes out and plays better, that the results are going to start to be there. Because some of it has been the other teams, as we've mentioned earlier in the show, but some of it is also just self-inflicted stuff, and you got to limit that. You got to make it, if a team's going to beat you, that they're going to go out and beat you, not that you're going to help them. And so cut down the mistakes and go out and just start playing better. And as that happens, I'm confident the results are going to be there because, like you said, there's some quality teams left on the schedule, but there were some really high quality teams they played the last 2 weeks.
No.
So like if they start playing better, I'm confident that things will turn around.
It's tough for me to say this for sure because there's a couple games pending that are unknowns, but I feel like Wilson may have played the two best teams on their schedule. Manheim Central might take issue to that. I certainly think Mifflin was the best team Wilson was going to play this year. I don't know that there's any argument against that.
None. Absolutely not.
And Exeter Manheim Central, that'd be an interesting matchup in the 5A playoffs.
Listen, Mifflin was up double digits on Pine Richland in the second half last year, and not just my opinion, but when I talk to these players, they feel they're better this year. I mean, now you have Eden Johnson at quarterback, and Connor Marinac was terrific, but I think Johnson gives them a little bit more speed.
He gives it a different dimension,
right?
An extra dimension,
right? And you also now have a year older Nick Singleton,
bigger, faster, stronger,
benching over 400 pounds.
Seeing his progression through the years has been kind of crazy too.
Yeah, I mean, he's become. Early in his career, he was trying to run around people, and now, I mean, he'll lower the boom on, but because he's not only the fastest player on the field, he's the strongest player on the field at the running back position. You have a year older Aiden Martin, who's starting now to get some Division I attention. They had Trey Rock.
Trey Rock had a
really good player picking up where Strausser.
Does he play basketball?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't believe so. But yeah, I mean, they're the clear favorite to win the district in 5A.
Hopefully, they'll actually get to play the game in the district this year.
Yeah, and then in the Penn Live poll in 5A, they're ranked second behind only Imhotep, who actually lost to a South College. But yeah, it's a heavyweight game. But so I would agree with that. Even you have to turn the negative into a positive. I was talking with the Exeter players about the loss to Central York, and they use that,
as a building block,
right? As motivation moving forward.
Well, so obviously we know Manheim Central is still on the horizon, and then in the LL League Section 1, it's probably going to be, and I believe they're back-to-back for Wilson. Hempfield and Township are the two biggest hurdles for a section title. But in between there, and this week, we have a complete unknown in Martin Luther King, the Golden Cougars from Philadelphia. Obviously, Wilson's never played them. The Bulldogs were supposed to travel to Philly last year, but because of COVID, getting rid of most of the non-league slate for many teams, or not all teams, or some teams not playing in the fall at all, moving to the spring, or not even having a season. Like MLK, we're not even sure how many games they played last year. We can't find the statistics and the results for their records. I thought they played in the spring. Then I read somewhere that they didn't play at all. Then Max Preps hasn't playing one game in the fall and one game in the spring. So we don't exactly know what's going on with Martin Luther King. From their social media, I can say that we know they're 5A, but they only have, I think, 49 kids on their roster. So they're a small 5A.
Right.
Or at least in terms of the number of kids on their roster. That's not a very big team for a 5A school.
We do know they've only played one game. In fact, I was talking with Jeremy Palm, Wilson's offensive coordinator, before the Exeter game, and he said, we have nothing on Martin Luther King because they didn't have their scrimmage, and their first two games were canceled. I think one was because it was right after all the flooding that they had in Philadelphia, and the other, I'm not sure if that was a COVID-19 related issue with an opponent or something like that, but they didn't have a scrimmage and they didn't play the first 2 weeks, so they finally played a game against Chester and lost a low-scoring game.
Yeah,
but that's so they have one film to go off of.
They hosted Chester on, I think, I don't even know if it was Friday.
It was Friday. Okay, it was
Friday night. Martin Luther King hosted Chester. The Clippers beat the Cougars 18-6, and we were looking over the stats beforehand. There was no offense in this game whatsoever. I mean, the Clippers, Chester only had not even 150 total yards of offense. Most of it came on the ground. One of the touchdowns was scored on a kickoff return. and Martin Luther King has no stats, so we have no idea how they scored. So we're completely going in blind, just like for the most part the team is too. I like the unknown surrounding this is just unbelievable. I've never been in a situation.
So often,
So they lost to Chester 18-6. They play us this week, and then they have 3 more road games in a row, all against Philadelphia teams, Northeast only Charner and John Bartram, before they get to return home. They play at the Germantown Super Site for most of these games. Ematep Charter on October 15th, and then Simon Gratz on the 22nd. Small team. Their head coach is Malik Jones. I believe he's been there for a few years with them. That's literally the extent of the information I have on Martin Luther King. Is that they're 0-1. They only scored 6 points.
You know what though?
They don't have a big team.
To kind of tie this into like the things we were saying just a couple minutes ago. Not forget the idea. I know in football there's so much prep that goes into it.
Right.
But just focus on you.
Oh, I totally
focus on
agree.
You. Like maybe this is what we
There's
need
so much to
in the
clean
sense of,
up
like,
from the last.
Look, let's just do our thing, do it well, and be confident that if we do what we can do, if we play like we can play, it'll be enough.
Right.
And honestly, if you play like you can play and it's not enough, there isn't anything you could have done anyway. So, I think, I don't know, while it's really weird to say it, and I know it probably drives the coaches absolutely insane just not knowing, because it's just not what they're used to, and we know they're like routine and all that stuff. Maybe this is maybe a step in the right direction where we're just, all right, we're going to focus on what we do. And
to me, it's get back to fundamentals this week. I mean, you can't have snaps going past the quarterback. You can't have the quarterback and running back running into each other in the backfield. I mean, stuff like that. That had nothing to do with Exeter.
Right.
That had nothing to do with Governor Mifflin. It'll have nothing to do with Martin Luther King.
Yeah,
that's all you.
Yep,
right.
Self-inflicted.
Right. That stuff.
Take that component out.
Right. And that if Wilson fans are upset at some of that, okay. I mean, that I could understand.
But we see that every year. Like, honestly, it's not. It's just.
Yeah, but I think the bar is so much higher.
They've been able to overcome it in years past, and right now they're having a tough time digging themselves out of holes that they have dug themselves.
Honestly, we kind of talked about that week 1 too. A lot of those mistakes were also there week 1. It's just
you got a kick return score.
They were able to overcome it.
Right.
It didn't matter because they won.
Right.
In the eyes of most people who are paying attention to the program, it doesn't matter because you won. They don't necessarily think about the mistakes and all the things that took place. They had a ton of penalty yards in that game. They had all these different things that kept taking place.
And Central Dauphin did not have the skill players to make you pay.
Right.
Like
they were running the quarterback most of the time, which is something
he's very good.
He's really good, but like they're always handing it off to a bowling ball of a fullback who also plays linebacker. Like that's what they always do. Yeah. Not as much this year.
Yeah.
So
and crazy to think that I want to go back to the time where we were talking about the players cramping. Like that was
right where that was the
big
injury
story,
issue.
Right,
the
that was the
cramping,
big thing. Was the
lack of pickle juice.
Yeah, let's bring that in. Bring it full circle.
I recommend Clover Farms ICT for the record.
I don't know that they would want them pumping sugar into their system either. I don't know that. I mean, I'm all for Clover Farms ICT. Like that is drink number one.
Is that the top seller at May's Sandwich Shop?
Because I buy it all. Because I buy it all.
So when I would go up, I was done with college a year before Joe was. So I would be going up to Penn State for the games or whatever, and I'd get a call, I'd be like, hey, stop by the shop, and I'd have like a package from his parents to carry up, and it included like gallons of ICT to take up to State College.
I'm the same way.
I should have doubled it up and just sold it, because I'm sure there were other Berks County natives up there that I could have made a good profit on it.
Well, no, see, the reason that I needed people to bring it up to me is not because it wasn't sold in State College. Miraculously, it actually was.
Really?
But it was only sold at one rival sandwich shop that I was not going to buy anything. Like, why would I do that?
I didn't know that part.
You're a man
of
principle.
That's right, exactly. Principle is a good word for the week. Anything else? Exeter, MLK, Wilson program in general?
A lot of interviews again up on my website. If you want to hear what the Exeter players had to say, Colin Payne, Nengel, Schloffer, who, by the way, just got offered yesterday for you Penn State fans. He got offered yesterday.
See, that's a sore subject here, Paul, because I believe it was 2 years ago, after Anthony Ivy helped
Oh.
Manhattan Township beat Wilson. He got his Penn State offer, and now Schloffer helps Exeter beat Wilson. He gets his Penn State offer. So it's one of those things that I don't know if I should be happy about this, but years from now when they're in the blue and white, I'll be okay with it. But
understood.
in the moment, it's not great.
Right.
It's not great.
But a lot of interviews too from previous weeks with Wilson players. I thought the pre-season interview with Doug Doms was great, and for people who haven't gone to the site yet, I also, not so much after the games, but the ones that I get at practice, I'll ask questions that are not related to football at all, just to kind of learn more about them, favorite teachers, hobbies, interests off the
Video
field.
games. That's
It is. I should have bought stock in Madden, man, because every kid mentions Madden over Call of Duty. Those two, it's like over and over. What happened to Tecmo Bowl and RBI baseball? But, Blades of Steel, Double Dribble, Baseball Stars, some of the Zelda,
there you go.
classics. But so all of that, and every week I put out my rankings on Monday. Also covered the Wyomissing Boyertown game. Wyomissing is one of the top ranked teams in the state in Class AAA.
Do they play Southern Columbia this
They
year?
do, yeah.
At
Southern Columbia.
I saw Southern Columbia won, and so they still have their like winning streak is up to some insane number now.
So that will feature
It's 60 some, isn't it?
I think it might be 63.
that will feature the two active coaches in Pennsylvania with the most wins all time.
Is that Roth?
Coach Roth and Bob Wolfram. They have the most among the active coaches. I think Coach Wolfram is around number 10 now on the all-time list.
So when I was in 4th grade, I think maybe right around there, Columbia. We lived in Columbia at the time.
Elysburg?
Not that one. So we lived next to Hempfield.
That
so
Columbia.
They won the district title. Travel up to Mount Carmel to play Southern Columbia.
The Silver Bowl.
Yeah, to play Southern Columbia in the state playoffs. And there's a single A team running out 85 kids on their roster, and there's Columbia with like 30, and we're just like, oh man, oh boy,
30
like,
with the coaches, right?
Right? Yeah, exactly. You need one bus. Like it was just it was an adventure. We'll leave it at that.
It's a real shame that the COVID year got rid of Southern Columbia coming to the
Absolutely.
A-field. I was looking forward to going to that game, and then when the government and PIAA and delays and cancellation, that was disappointing.
I think Southern Columbia initially made the decision they were only playing league games.
Yeah.
And that's what initially
a lot of
right.
did
Yeah,
that.
exactly right. But that Wyomissing team last year, I mean, there were seven all-state players on that team in AAA.
Yeah. Well,
that would have been
made
tremendous.
the state final, and they were they had a battle in the state final last year.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I know you said you're not sure how much more of the Bulldogs you're going to see in person, at least over the next month plus. Maybe we'll catch you at Gursky for the Township game, depending on how things go. Hopefully Wilson players respond and they can go on a little winning streak and set up a big showdown against the Streaks at Gursky on October 30th. I think that's probably the next chance that you might get to see Wilson in person, but who knows? We'll see what happens. And even if you haven't seen the Bulldogs in person, we're always welcome to come on and talk football with us. So.
Hey, congratulations to your Dolphins.
Hey, I'll take it. Hey, 1 point win on the road.
Did you send a message to your uncle? I saw he was there today.
He was there today.
He was at the game?
He has season tickets.
Oh, nice.
Since the mid 90s.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, he's been in for the long
haul. That's a dedicated Patriots fan right there.
Yep. So I believe he had him before Bledsoe took the Patriots to the Super Bowl, or maybe it was right after that. But yeah, he's had him since I'm pretty sure before Brady. Like he's a '90s Patriots. He's lived up there for decades.
Before Brady that's really a long time.
Yeah, right. Because Brady's in his 42nd year on the roster.
That's another man who would not go to a rival sandwich shop for ICT.
That's
I
right.
can tell you that.
Exactly. Well, and you notice the fantasy football trophies that not down here anymore.
Oh yeah.
So it's disappeared. I know that was a point of discussion previously.
Yes. Tremendous trophy.
It is.
By the way, my fantasy team got to play Aaron Rodgers
and
Saquon Barkley today.
That's
if I can't win this week, I'm done.
Justin and I have Barkley in the league we coached together, so
Right, yeah.
that was
And
disappointing.
partly maybe due to draft strategy, but like
We may or may not have 5 Penn Staters on the team.
right, yes.
Hey, pick up Juwan Johnson.
I know,
He
right?
might
you
have to be our
jab
tight
him.
end.
Well, yeah. So we have. We're playing at Coach Filer. We're playing Adam this week.
Okay.
Wilson basketball assistant coach, and he was texting us during the draft. What are you guys doing? And he's we roomed at Penn State together. I mean, he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Look, we're not trying to do this. It's just the way the draft is falling."
Like Saquon was in the second round. He
Well, yeah,
wasn't like we
our
took him
first
one
round.
overall.
You stuck
or
to your
anything.
draft board.
We
Right.
did.
It's
And
just
then-
the way they fell
And then
to.
we went Allen Robinson, and then Chris Godwin was there. And then we were the last person to take a tight end. We took Jasicki.
So you weren't reaching.
No,
That's
we
the
weren't.
key to a draft.
Now maybe our
Got to
last
stick
pick,
to your board.
our backup tight end was Fryermuth, just to
Oh
we at that
We're
point
like-
we were in.
Yeah.
We're doing this, right? And it's the last pick of the
Right.
draft.
Get
And-
one luxury pick.
And we're nothing if not committed. So
and, we are blue and white
Consistent.
through and through. Red and white on Fridays, blue and white on Saturdays. That's how we roll. So, again, Paul, thanks for joining us. You all listening out there, live or in the future or past, I guess. Be sure to check out BurkeSportsReport.com for Paul's interviews and his rankings. Football right now, but I know a lot coming in the winter and spring with at least basketball and baseball, which is right up Paul's alley. So definitely check out BurkeSportsReport.com. Final closing thoughts from us. I guess my thing, Justin, is just a plea to the fans and the community to, stay supportive, be present, come out and cheer, have fun. This is not the be all end all. This is just a high school sports team that we enjoy cheering to victory, but we support them no matter what happens on the field. And that's kind of the point of, a scholastic athletic competition. This is supposed to be a tight-knit community, and let's keep it that way. Let's have fun. Let's get back to having fun. And I know winning cures all, so let's hope for a victory Friday night back at Gursky against Martin Luther King. It is also, I believe, Youth Night got moved to this Friday night, as well as the Wilson Football Tradition Club's championship team reunions. Were welcoming back players and coaches from the fall 1985, 1990, and 1996 championship teams. And I know the 1990 squad is coming back in full force. They make up the vast majority of returning players. All played on that 1990 team, which made it to the state Final Four, losing to Ridley. And I know a little controversial game.
Is it 14-12?
Yes. Oh, it was something like that.
Okay.
I think you're right. I think it was 14-12. And that's a year after losing in, heartbreaking fashion in the state championship. The other guys, those are some of the best teams to play at Wilson, the 89 and 90 teams. And those guys from the 90 squad, that Wilson class of 91 were on both teams that went so far and set the bar pretty high for Coach Jerry Slemmer's teams. Oh, and by the way, Coach Jerry Slemmer will be back.
Nice.
In attendance. So,
and his first win was against Exeter.
Exeter,
Just some of the digging that was going on
yeah,
last week.
Yeah, Paul and I were talking a lot last week,
Yeah.
going through the history. We were digging into the Exeter rivalry. I was having a tough time pinpointing some of the years, and I eventually got through. And yeah, you were the one that said Coach Slemmer's first win was against Exeter, and I found the article and I sent it to you. So
you have to go to solid sources like myself and Joe, because there was some stuff out there that these teams had never played before when they had actually played 6 times before. But yeah, one of the interesting notes was that Jerry Slemmer's first victory was against Exeter.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of interesting stuff I found after digging into that, pertaining to Coach Slemmer and Coach Gursky, and really Coach Doms all down the road. I don't think either gentleman won their first game against Mifflin.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I know Coach Gursky didn't, because they didn't beat Mifflin, I believe, until 1967. I believe actually Mifflin had won 12 in a row, an entire generation of Wilson students had never seen their team beat Mifflin. This was in the 50s into the 60s and the first few years of Coach Gursky. But I believe the 1967 game was the big one that Coach Gursky's team with Bill Hawes and Mike Ritz beat Mifflin, and they went 10-0 that year. That was kind of the coming out party for Wilson football.
I think that was a team my uncle was on.
Yes, you're right. Yep, because when we had them back a few years ago for the Tradition Club reunions, your uncle was part of that group. So, and then Jerry Slummer's first year was that 83?
I think 83.
83. I believe they lost. It was a low-scoring, close game, but a loss. And then Coach Dom's first year played Mifflin in game 1 and game, I guess, 12. That would have been losses. So yeah, those big three Wilson coaches didn't beat Mifflin their first time. So, and I'm sure people will never let them forget.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Amazing that they were able to coach the second game.
Right. Yeah. How? Well.
And the game after.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, let's not. We can go on in it forever about some of the wacky and crazy stuff that has been said, knee-jerk reactions. But that was just something I found after talking with you about the Exeter stuff. But it's funny you mentioned about like some of these games and the series history, how not everyone has a grasp on it, or it's tough to track down. And like I said, I still have a gap in mine. I'm still trying to fill that in. There's about a 20-year period that I don't have the game-by-game information for. But, you go to a source that was there and in it. Coach Don's been there for 45 years. And I'll mention something, he'll be like, no. And I'm like, oh, that's not what I read. But I don't want to tell you no, because you were there, so I'm just gonna move on because I don't know where to go from here. But it's funny when you got so much players, coaches, rivals, games, stats. You're never gonna be able to keep track of everything, and that's what I'm trying to do with the Bulldog Hour site. A year by year history, season by season history, and there's a lot more on computers than there is on the web, and I'm trying to put it all up there for everyone to see. So hopefully I'll get there eventually. So that was my long-winded closing. Justin, what about you?
Yeah, I think I just summed it up like, you know what, this is the week. Just don't worry about what we have like coming in or any of that. Just focus on what we need to do. Get better. It's time to rally, turn this thing around, and let's start with a strong 7 finish here, right? Finish these last 7 games strong. But that all starts with this week. So don't worry about the last couple weeks. Don't worry about what's coming up. Let's worry about this week. Handle your business. Yeah. And it'll be fine.
Tune out the noise. Circle the wagons. Play for you and your fellow teammates. Have fun. That's what it's all about. And that's what we're going to end. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks to Paul Roberts for joining us once again. Justin and I will be back in 1 week's time to recap the game against Martin Luther King and then preview the game against Manheim Central. So for Justin and the entire Wilson football program, I'm Joe Mays saying, Go Bulldogs.
You're listening to the Bulldog Hour. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.